Hi, everyone. My name is Ronit Treatman, and I am the other side of the mirror from Carl. I'm from Israel. My father was an Israeli diplomat. Our family was mixed. Part of my family on my father's side is from Bukhara, Central Asia. The other part, Polish Jews, Holocaust survivors. I never thought I had anything to do with Spain or the Inquisition or Portugal or any of it. My father was posted in Venezuela. I grew up there for my whole childhood. So, as I always tell my friends, part of my heart will always belong to Latin America. And Venezuela had, in the Jewish community, half were Ashkenazic and half were Sephardic. Really came down from Spain. They were very proud of it. They knew their Spanish ancestry. They all married only each other. And they were the ones, because when I was a kid, nobody talked about the Inquisition. They were the ones who kind of told me that they were expelled and that there was nothing left in Spain and Portugal. And that was what I always believed. The Jews were expelled, there's nothing left there, and that's the end of that. And not only that, they said that there was a cherem, which means a ban from visiting Spain for 500 years. So until 1992, I still remember 1992, people were celebrating. They were saying, we can finally visit. Now, the Holocaust survivors in my family, trying to, as Carl was talking about, understand family history. Talking about family history in my family was walking on eggshells. You asked the wrong thing, you said the wrong thing, somebody was gonna have what I now know is be triggered, start taking out the Valium. So we were very careful about asking anything. But on the other hand, it was very, very close to my mother's mother, my grandmother, who took the position that if she couldn't verify somebody had been killed, maybe they were still alive somewhere, she just didn't know about it. So on her deathbed, she made me promise that I would never stop looking for people who may have survived. Well, she passed away in 1985, and I kind of did whatever I could, at first with phone books, looking up last names, then Facebook, and then DNA came out. And I told my brother, wow, let's try this. At least we know where they were all over the world, right? So we actually did our DNA test in 2012. There was this company from Canada called GeneBase. It was very expensive back then, but I said, oh, come on, it'll be a birthday present. We'll both do it. Because we needed a boy and a girl to have the matrilineal map and the patrilineal map. This wasn't about family reunification back then. This was only just know where you're from. So we took the test, and on his side, father's side, it was exactly what we thought. I think we were expelled with the Babylonians. First we were in Babel, and then we went to Persia when it was the Persian Empire. It chose Susa, Susan, where Esther's from. And then going down the Silk Road, Central Asia, Bukhara, which today is in Uzbekistan, and we're there for thousands of years. And then my mother's side has a surprise, because I thought they'd been in Poland forever. Well, it shows that before Poland, they'd been in Spain. And then the way this test worked, it sort of compared us to different population groups genetically. And it just kept coming up with the name of a city that I'd never heard of, Girona. It's a city north of Barcelona, like an hour north drive. And my mind was blown. I said, how is this possible? So, my husband and I traveled to Girona. We explored it, and, it was a very, very, and, people when you I don't, maybe even still today, you visit Spain, they're very opaque. They won't say we descend from Jews. They'll drop hints, but you really have to know how to listen to them. And luckily for me, because I speak Spanish, they felt more comfortable with me. I was like something they hadn't encountered before. I'm Israeli, but I speak Spanish really well. So they felt comfortable, and I tried to decode it. So we came back, I wrote an article about it, I published it in the Times of Israel. This was a new thing in 2012 to use your DNA to understand your family. And then all of a sudden on Facebook, all these people from Spain start trying to be my friend. I'm like, what do they want from me? But, I was curious. So then they started to send me these pictures. They're from Barcelona. Look, we light candles. We had them in this jar every Friday. We're doing it forever. All these traditions. And I don't know, something about it. The first one who sent it to me actually started to shake in front of the computer. I said, oh, it's not all gone. There was something left there that none of us knew about. And so I really felt for them, because growing up in South America, big taboo. You don't talk about the Inquisition. Spain and Portugal, big taboo. You never talk about that. And you certainly don't talk about being descended from Jews. Israel, you publish, oh, I forgot to tell you, there was a very important thing in this map. It shows Girona, and then it shows that side of the family, reaches 1492, the half of the family that I come from goes to Italy, the Netherlands, and then ultimately Poland. But then there's a line that goes to Brazil, right around 1600. Now, maybe in your class you covered. What happened in 1580? Does anyone know? The Iberian Union. The King of Portugal married the daughter of Isabella and Ferdinand. And right around the 1600, people were allowed to go anywhere in the Iberian Union if they were willing to put up with the life in the colonies. And I think because of the Inquisition, anybody who was trying to preserve anything of crypto-Jewish heritage wanted to get as far away from them as they could. And so it just shows, and I don't know if the line ending there means they're still there and I have hot, Brazilian cousins who can dance, or they were all killed for some reason. I don't know what it means. And Brazil doesn't have a lot of people who take these DNA tests, at least nothing that I can connect with. Because although I have friends, by the way, of crypto-Jewish descent who have found family in Israel. So maybe one day we'll make a connection. So I published in the Israeli press. The blowback I got for admitting, that even though we're from Poland, we had been from Spain. And by the way, I'm not Sephardic. It's still Ashkenazic, even though it was Girona. We're what's called Catalan Jews. So it's not Sephardic, it's not Ashkenazi, it's Catalan. And they didn't speak Ladino or Spanish, they spoke Catalan. Okay, and there was a language that I think is extinct, but it was Judeo-Catalan, mix of Hebrew and Catalan. The blowback I got from Israel, why did you dig? There was a reason they hid this. The stigma. Oh God, you might have Catholic relatives. So, maybe they're not white. Who knows what they are? It was just, so anyway, so I was doing that, and then people were corresponding with me. I got an amazing email one day from a young woman from Venezuela, where I grew up. She said, I have Jewish roots and I've decided to return. I want to convert to Judaism. And I asked her, well, what special Jewish things did your family have? She said, the only thing we have is lots of paintings of Queen Esther all over the house. And I'm going, Queen Esther. I'm thinking Queen Esther from my Israeli perspective. Hey, I grew up in Venezuela. It's the land of beauty queens, right? Queen Esther, she won the beauty contest. She married the king. Everybody wants to be Esther when we celebrate Purim. But if you look at who Queen Esther was in the story of Esther, and it is also in the Christian Bible, okay, she was a Jew. Her first name was Hadassah, a Jewish name. And then her uncle Mordechai, for her protection, put her in the palace to compete for the king and said, you're not Hadassah anymore, you're Esther. Don't tell anyone Jewish, but don't forget who you are. Esther was a crypto-Jew, right? And, the legend is that when she married King Ahasuerus, she didn't eat meat, she tried to keep kosher, she was eating like grains and nuts and things like that, and hid who she was, and then risked coming out to the king to save her people. So she, by the way, these are crypto-Jewish artifacts. These are some of the crypto-Jews all over, whether it was Spain, Portugal, or in America, turned Esther into a saint. So let me start with this one. This is Saint Esther. When she told me this story, I couldn't get it out of my head. I did a deep dive, and I said, wow, I wonder if it's true and what it means. And I started reading about Saint Esther. So I actually called santeros, saint makers in New Mexico. I called one who was very famous, and I said, have you ever been asked to commission a Saint Esther? And he and I were talking in Spanish. I went right into Spanish. I was very impressed that they've kept Spanish there for all this time, because they've been under, Anglo-American rule for a long time. Spoke Spanish, and because again, we connected, he said, finally, okay, I'm going to give you someone to call about that. So I call his cousin. His cousin is Charlie Carrillo. He's a very, very famous saint maker from New Mexico. His work is in the Smithsonian. He's received many awards. And Charlie Carrillo tells me, I have made Saint Esther's for people. And I said, well, can I see one? Maybe I could buy one. I want one. I'm so interested in this. I want one. So he sold me this one. And I wrote about this one in the Times of Israel too. But if you look at her, first of all, there's no name on the saint, right? Just the saint. Because again, everyone's trying to do this stealthily. Now, well, how did they get away with having Saint Esther in the house? I don't know if any of you are Catholic, but the way it works in Catholicism, the Vatican doesn't make saints, right? Saints exist, they're among us, they're just waiting to be discovered. Anyone, hey, I could be a saint, anybody can be a saint. So the way it worked for them is they considered her a saint, and she has, the way saints work in the Catholic religion is saints embody certain attributes. So in the eye of a Catholic, Esther is submission, right? She obeys, she's obeying, she's submission. She does what her uncle tells her. For the crypto-Jews, she's a symbol of resistance, right? She's everything they want to be. She kept who she was, she survived, she saved her people, then she was able to return and live a Jewish life. Very powerful symbol. I had a friend from Portugal write to me that in Portugal, any female saint can serve as a Saint Esther because she is who we want her to be when she's up on the wall. So this is of Saint Esther. It is in the New Mexico tradition. He makes all of his paints from natural ingredients, plants, animals, minerals. So the way he sets it is and you're welcome to come up and get a closer look, but there's a curtain because in New Mexico tradition, the world is a stage and we better understand what is happening because life is fleeting. He has myrtle leaves because her name Hadassah means, right? Hadassah is a myrtle. So Hadassah is a myrtle. And she's holding a scepter and it has a pomegranate on it. And a pomegranate is a symbol of fertility in Judaism. It's also a symbol of all the commandments that we keep, the 613 commandments, because it's said to have 613 seeds. So she tried to remember all the commandments, right? Even as she was hiding. The second one, and Charlie Carrillo gave me permission to say this. Carrillo, right, is a crypto-Jewish last name, and he comes from a crypto-Jewish family, but it took him a long time to feel comfortable enough to tell me, yes, I have Jewish roots. He had just traveled to Israel, and so then he sent me this one. What does this one have? It has her name in Hebrew calligraphy, Esther. He's not hiding her anymore, right? This is a similar Esther in New Mexico tradition, but he included the Hebrew. So in 2015, there was an English Jew who went to Israel. His name is Ashley Perry, but Perry is really Perez. He's a Sephardic Jew from London, and he worked in the Knesset, in the Israeli parliament, and he headed the caucus to reconnect with descendants of Jews from Spain and Portugal. And so right from the beginning, we were friends, and he had, he started these Facebook groups, and he called his organization Reconectar, which means to reconnect. And the Facebook groups are in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Catalan. But Ashley does not speak anything except English and Hebrew. And I was like, Google Translate's not cutting it, Ashley. You're not communicating very well. And so initially, every day I'd correct it. I'd say, this is wrong here. This is wrong here. Finally, I just joined as a volunteer. And now I direct Reconectar. I've been helping him since 2015. And we have, I wrote a book for this community, by the way, because we have a lot of people that are from all over the world, not just Spain and Portugal, a lot from Mexico, from all over Latin America. Anyway, so during COVID, when I was pinned in the house anyway, I wrote this book because as Carl mentioned earlier, some of these people live in a place they're never going to meet a Jew anywhere. Like I had one university student in Mexico who wrote me an email saying, can you help me? I'm supposed to interview a Jew for this project. I have no Jews to interview. So, I answered. It was a very interesting question about the difference of why Catholic Church have so much art on the walls and why, as you'll notice, you don't see any images of people in here, right? We don't do images. And so I was explaining that for us, it's all about the words. He had no one to ask this. So I wrote this book. Here it is. It's in English, in Spanish, in Portuguese, and in Catalan. I wrote the English and Spanish versions. It's basically for somebody who doesn't know anything. even if they have no community or are not welcome, if you want to at least do the holidays on your own, lots of good ideas, lots of hands-on things to do, especially with children. Explaining very simple, what's this holiday? Why are we doing this? What do we do? So I'm proud to say that Rabbi Gabay and Rabbi Zarnigian checked the book for me and gave me what's called a letter of approbation, which means book's kosher, right? So I'm not making anything up. I'm not changing anything. I'm not doing it wrong.
It's a wonderful book.
He's the best, see? And then I had two friends translated for me, one into Portuguese and one into Catalan. The woman who translated to Portuguese is a descendant of Branca Diaz. Did you ever talk about Branca Diaz in your class? First woman in Brazil to found a synagogue and a Jewish school. She was burned at the stake for what is called Judaizing. Well, she has descendants. And this young woman is a friend of mine. And so I said, nothing could possibly be more meaningful to me than to have you do this. The other young woman who is from Barcelona, she translated it to Catalan because while I can understand both languages, I'm not good enough to do that. Initially, I just thought, great, she wants the gig. I need someone to translate it to Portuguese. I'm going to hire her. And then it took her a long time because we're all conditioned this way. They are conditioned to fear and to be closed. It's really a conditioning thing. It's a survival instinct that passed down in the family. It took her a long time to warm up to me to finally say, I'm returning to Judaism. I actually sent her a necklace with a Star of David from Israel as a gift when she started her journey. I was very happy for her. Although we, by the way, do not convert anyone. But, and as Carl said, that's a journey they make alone. And I tell people this. If they ask me about converting, I tell them, you're going to leave everyone behind. Normally, it's just you, just so you know that. I've been doing this for many years. There's only one custom that I have in common with some of these crypto Jews that must have been a convergence before the family split. And it is this is wild. I learned this in the 1970s as a kid in Israel. My grandmother was teaching me how to clean the house. And her thing was, you sweep everything to the middle of the room, you throw it away. You don't let the neighbors see how you clean, how dirty the house was. You don't throw it outside. And I realized this must have come from when they finally had, because there was something called limpieza de sangre. Did you learn about that? That means the purity of blood, right? When you have, before the edict of expulsion was the king and queen of Spain issued it, they had a whole thing about the people who did convert, are you real, are you not? So they wanted to make sure that their kids married real Catholics. So there was a lot of suspicion and everyone was spying on everyone. Now, imagine if it's Friday and you're cleaning your house and you don't want your nosy neighbors noticing what you're doing. You're going to close the curtains and not let anybody see you're cleaning. And that persisted until the 70s. I mean, I wasn't allowed to sweep it out of the house like I thought I would. I got in a lot of trouble for that. So that was the only one that we had in common still. Any questions for me? Yes.
I just want to know, somebody conversos settled in New Mexico. Why New Mexico?
Because if you think about it, okay, they founded Mexico City. Then the Inquisition came. So people tried to get as far away from it as they could. The further north they went, the wilder it was. The more dangerous, the less likely the Inquisition was to follow them. And I met lots of crypto-Jewish families in El Paso, Texas. I was there presenting at a conference. Why do you think it's called El Paso? Why is it that name? El Paso del Norte. The pass to the north. It didn't start in North America. It started in Central America. Well, I guess Mexico is North America, but south of that. So that's why there's so many. You have them in Colorado, in Texas, in New Mexico. And there's a lot in Monterrey. So actually here in Philadelphia, we had someone from the Carvajal family. Did you know this family that founded Mexico City? She used to write for the Philadelphia Inquirer, and her part of the family survived because they ran away I think she was in the Dominican Republic. But her ancestor is very famous for being called Lumbroso, the illuminated. He was captured by the Inquisition. He returned to Judaism. He made a paper out of corn husks and ink out of charcoal, and he wrote a whole book with his prayers. And that book was just recovered a few years ago. It had been lost, and I went to see it in an exhibition in New York. It was unbelievable. Returned to the Mexican government, but their family was burned at the stake for Judaizing by the Mexican Inquisition. So, now this was crazy for me because with all the things I published in English and Spanish and in Hebrew, so I attended the international school in Caracas. And half of my class were kids of diplomats and Americans, and then the other half were kind of Venezuelans. And some of my teachers were from Spain, and I never imagined that, right, except for one suspicion of one friend, that anybody had any Jewish roots, or I didn't really think about it. And after I published, I had to go first. And then some of them were writing to me, can you check my last name, because we were told this. and including my best friend, by the way, who was from Peru. I'm like, wow, now you tell me. It's just, you couldn't have asked me years ago. Not that I would have had the information, but yes.
I just had coffee the other day with someone who was suggested to me by a person in her class, who was from the Arbanel family.
Arbanel.
And, yeah, and she brought the book along that was part of her family, and all different spellings of that.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about
Yes,
that?
well, last names are amazing, and I love it because so many times, I post something every day for many of the biggest honor for me is not only do I post things every day on Facebook for Reconectar, I manage the pages in Spanish and Portuguese and Catalan, but there are actually descendants who themselves have founded groups where they are, and they have these Facebook groups, and they have asked me to help out. So, so I do, because it's, to understand how little they trust. Like, we've been friends for 10 years. They finally say, Ronnie, can you help out? That's how long it takes. Last names are always a big question. Your last name is never enough to say, just because your name is Montoya doesn't mean that you have Jewish roots. You have to do genealogy. You have to do DNA. You have to do a lot. But what's cool about the last names is sometimes there are secret messages inside the last names. And now there's going to be a whole talk in Barcelona that they're doing about our last names, how we chose them, how we hide messages in them. And when we give them, what blessing are we bestowing on the person who's getting it, whether it's a baby or someone who is returning, because sometimes people take a new name. And I'll give you an example. My favorite last name of a crypto Jew, of a converso, is Rojas. Do you know why? So if you hear Rojas in Spanish, it means red. But if you take Rojas and you flip it around, it says Sahor. Sahor in Hebrew is Zachor. Remember. Right? So they have, there's different, they say that places, right? You go to Colombia, Medellin. What's the name Medellin? Modi'in, a city in Israel. So it's a fascinating area when people look at their names. So sometimes, I'll look at a name and for example, the very famous writer Borges from Argentina? Borges was obsessed with the idea that he came from Jewish roots. He couldn't prove it. He loved Jews. He loved Israel. He lectured at the Hebrew University. He wrote a famous article in Argentina, which was really anti-Semitic in his lifetime, called Yo Judío, Me the Jew. Only after he passed did the proof come out that, yes, his family came out of Portugal. They found them in the Inquisition records, people who had been burned. But if you read his works, he has, El Aleph. Even he has a book called The Garden of, how is that in English? I don't think I know if it's The Garden of Circuitous Paths, maybe they call it that in English, but it's almost like studying Torah, that you go inside of a garden or a grove and you can get lost in there. So he was very steeped in it and really couldn't connect to it in his life because he didn't have the tools. He didn't have the information we have now. Yes?
Yeah, we've heard that Spain has retreated from welcoming people back. What is going on in Portugal?
Portugal, you can probably still get it. You have to to ask attorneys and some of the consulate people. I'm not an expert. I personally have no interest in getting that. I know there are lawyers in Israel who are really good at it, and they do a great job with the genealogy.
Can I answer that?
Yes.
Yeah, if I could, I'd love to answer that. Portugal also changed the law, and they basically shut the door solid. You have to show a connection to Portugal to get it now. Owned property, for example, was one of the examples they use. Now, they kicked out the Jews over 4 centuries ago, and now they're saying you got to have a connection to the country, a country that they kicked out. And so it's come to a halt. And
At the same time, they're inviting, from what I've heard, they're inviting people to come and buy something in Portugal and we'll give you status regardless of religion. It's
Yeah.
money.
well, they're changing those rules because there's too many foreigners that are moving in there, and so the golden visas, they're trying to stop that. So Portugal and Spain have pretty much halted their programs. The goodwill is over. They've satisfied themselves. They've moved on. So thank you.
Yeah, I have to say that growing up in Venezuela was a country where lots of people really hate the Spaniards to this day. I mean, if you meet a really mean person there, they go, too much Spanish blood, it's like that. So I personally never had an interest in getting citizenship for any reason. And I think I feel more connected to some of the Jewish pirates, which you may have heard about. Did you hear about the Jewish pirates of the Caribbean? Well, why were they pirates? They were there to get revenge from Spain, right? For what was done to the family. And I will tell you about my favorite one, about last name. So his name was Samuel Palash. He was a son of people who had been expelled from Spain. They went down to Morocco. He was born there, and ended up. So he wanted adventure, so he ended up becoming one of the people who were sort of privateers from Amsterdam. And so he was the son of a rabbi. He was a rabbi. So here you have a rabbi pirate. He had a fleet of pirate boats. Everybody had to keep kosher, and each boat had a synagogue. So not only are you pinned in a boat, you have to keep kosher and go to services, okay? And then whatever you capture, 1/10, you're going to give to the synagogue in Amsterdam, which, if any of you have been to it, is absolutely magnificent. It is called the Esnoga, the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue of Amsterdam. Magnificent, magnificent place. And they have the Etz Chaim library, the longest running Jewish library in the world, an incredible library. If you go there during the holidays, they have no electricity, 1,000 candles. It's unbelievable. He's buried there, by the way. So you had this fleet, and they collaborated with a Moorish pirate who was doing the same thing because, right, although, okay, they were at war with the Christian, but the Muslims were also kicked out of Spain, right? So the two of them, the name of the Moorish pirates was Sinan Reis. These were the Barbary pirates. And they did it to get revenge because everything had been taken from their families. So that is, and the Palash name has lots of different versions, and one of them leads back to Venezuela. I'm almost finished. One of them leads back to Venezuela. There was one of the versions of Palash is Palacios. Venezuela had a gorgeous beauty queen. Her name was Barbara Palacios, and she was from the Catholic branch of that family. But yes, so, and I guess our time is up. You're welcome to take a closer look.